Welcome you all for the second day of our spring conference from District 101. Just a few house items. Please do not chat to everyone. You can have some private chats if you want to, just so that we don't interrupt this speaker. Of course, when the speaker asks for chatting, that's perfectly fine, as we did yesterday. And you all know where your restrooms are, and you all know when to get breakfast, when to mute yourself. Videos are allowed. It's encouraged even. Keep your videos on, because our session this morning is all about emoting. So keep your videos on, and please keep yourself muted unless and until you're called for. With that, I would like to go for the agenda for today. We have a workshop by Lindy Maclaine on emoting, how to be more expressive, and a workshop by Mike Carr on editing for excellence, how to refine your speech like a champion. We all need that. And talking of champions, we have our international speech contest later at 11:30 a.m. today. And we want to be on time. We will be on time for every single session. So let's get ready to roll. For our first session for today, think about this. When you speak, do you always get a feedback saying, I would like to see more of you in the speech. I would like to see more anecdotes. Can you take me on more of an emotional journey? We all know emotion lies at the heart of a good storytelling. Whether expressing emotion comes easily to you or not, it is a skill that can be learned. Our presenter today grew up following the rule that good girls should be nice and be quiet. Wonder who came up with that rule. Now, she's neither of those things. And her third place winning speech on the 2020 International Speech Contest world stage is a very emotional one. So you know it is possible to break free. Are you ready? Are you ready to expand your emotional expression? Turn on your cameras and prepare your face to participate with her workshop entitled Emote, Expanding Your Emotional Expression. Please welcome to the screen, Lindy Maclaine.
Thank you, Madam Conference Chair, and welcome everybody. Come and be 10 years old again with me. Come on, we're going up to the attic. It's a narrow stairway, be careful. All right, here we go. We got to push up. You know those attic. Have you ever been in an attic that has that kind of doorway? Mine does. Okay, so here we go. All right, now we close it. You hear? Okay, come on now. We're going over by that alcove over there. Now be careful of your head. There's some nails coming through the roof. Okay, so let's sit down here. Have you got your snack? Okay, and have you got your book? I'm so excited about the book that I'm reading. I just want to know what's going to happen next. Sometimes it's really scary, and sometimes it's even sad. But what I like best are the happy endings. So I always read fairy tales. Stories are like emotional calisthenics. And for all of my life, I have loved them because they make me feel alive. And that is what we're about this morning, feeling alive. Let me give you a brief roadmap of what we're going to do. We're going to uncover your default expression. We're going to talk about demonstrating versus authentic emotions and how those play into speaking. Both of them have their place. We're going to talk about and practice both of them. And before I leave, I will make sure that you have a handout to take with you. But this is not about watching me. It is about participation. So please, if you don't already have your cameras on, put your cameras on. Now, show me by show of hands in the reaction buttons, who would like to still be sleeping? Yeah? Okay, me too. But here you are. So I promise I'm going to make it worth your while. You're going to make it worth your while. We're going to warm up. We're going to have some fun. Type in the chat for me. Is it easy for you to emote in your speeches? Y for yes, N for no. And whether it's easy or not, you're here. So I know that you are interested in getting better at it. Now, why is emotion important in speeches? Declan, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I think when we're emotional in speeches, we're closer to being authentic, Lindy, and we're more likely to connect with people if they see the true self, our true selves.
So authenticity and connection, that's great. Anybody have something to add? Alita, do you have anything? Oh, I got somebody's hand up. That is Karen. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on. If I got your name wrong, sorry about that.
You're right, it is Karen. Yes, absolutely. So by having the appropriate emotional expression on your face, you're drawing them into your story and you're getting them more involved, and that's making a more impactful speech to them.
Absolutely. So keeping people engaged.
Right.
Anything else? Connection, authenticity, engagement. Alita, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it helps your audience relate to where you're coming from.
Relatability. Yes.
Yeah.
Has anybody ever watched someone tell a story? Well, I went to the store and then I talked to this guy and then I went down this and I went down this. And pretty soon you're just off thinking about something. Your mind just checks out. If there's no emotion, it doesn't matter how gripping the story is, you're gone usually. I mean, I am personally, so I'll only speak for myself. Now, so that's why. Let's talk about the how of emotion. All right, first, let me ask you, when babies arrive in this world, do they make their emotional state clear? Y or N in the chat? Okay, and if you put N, you have not been around enough babies. So let's agree that you arrived in this world with the ability to express yourself fully, unselfconsciously in public. So what happened? Life happens. Rules happen, society happens, parenting happens, school happens, all layers that tell you how to behave, and most of that is to curb your emotional expression. So when it comes to emoting while speaking, what you're really having to do is unlearn years of learned behavior, and that can take a long time. So be patient with yourself, but continue to encourage yourself because it's so worth it to get there in your speeches. Now, just a word about kind of the mechanics of emotion. It comes from a thought. The thought is first, and specificity is key. In acting training, there's a couple of different schools about emotional preparation. One is memory. That can work. The other is imagination. That can work equally well. But it's all about specificity. If I say what's sad, if I say the word sad, it's much more effective for you to actually think of a situation or a circumstance or a person that makes you feel sad, as opposed to just thinking the word sad, 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 what's that? So specificity starts with a thought, goes to your body, and expresses itself through your body, through your face, through your voice, through the whole thing, right? Okay. But understanding that thought is the first thing is helpful. All right. Let me ask you a question. What saying or rule cut off your permission to express yourself clearly? Go ahead and type it in chat if it's something that you can pull to mind. Mine was, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything. As you can imagine, I grew up in a very quiet household. My parents would fight in absolute silence. The silent treatment was normal sometimes, especially during those times when there was conflict, which in life is frequently, right? So how do you interpret silence? Well, I got pretty good at it. But I also got good at understanding that it was not okay to express anger. And that was really clear to me. In fact, by the time I became an adult, really somewhere inside me, I believe that if I let my anger out, someone would be destroyed. Really, I mean, that sounds silly, but that's how I felt. That's how important it was to me to keep it contained. And then in one Sanford Meisner acting class, it changed. I came into a scene with the preparation that evoked fury. I walked in and I was so angry and I threw things and I yelled and I screamed and I felt that fury vibrating through my whole body and through my whole voice. And then the other person said something and I started laughing out of the blue. I just started laughing. And then something else happened. And in a moment I was crying. Tears were coming down my face. Now, two amazing things happened that day. One, I learned that my anger did not destroy people. It did not nearly have the power that I attributed to it. And second of all, I learned that when you let yourself feel an emotion, it changes quickly. Often in about 90 seconds. If you really lean in, it'll transform. That's a good thing to know. And there are no rules when you're in the middle of a speech about where the emotion takes you. If you go like that, that's just normal, and that's a good thing. That means you're open and allowing emotion to flow through you. Okay, so we've talked about where we're going. We've talked about what kind of stoppers have had you stopped, and I see lots of people are sharing what those things are. So I'm going to leave it to you to be reading those. Myself, I'm not very good at multitasking, so I'm not going to read them out loud. Knowing those things is essential because then you can give yourself a new message. Let's do something together. All right. Does everybody have their camera on yet? Because if you don't, it's time. All right. Oh, yes, most of you do now. Good. Okay. If you don't, turn it on. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Go to gallery view, go to your picture, the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner, and choose pin. Okay, I want you to pin yourself so that you see yourself big on the screen. All right, now we're going to do this exercise. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, and I'm going to take you through just a short little visualization. And when I say open your eyes, I want you to look at your face, and you have to do it quickly before your mind takes over. And we're going to do that twice. All right. So here we go. You're going to play with me. All right. Close your eyes. All right. Imagine that you are at the grocery store. Got your cart in front of you. You're pushing it down the aisle. And you've got that list in your head. What kind of coffee do I need to get today? And what was it I was supposed to get else? Was it milk? Oh, maybe it was. Oh, I know. Oh, look, there's the Tang. Oh, I used to like Tang when I was little. And here comes someone around the corner and you look up and open your eyes. What do you see on your face? Make note of that. Okay, close them again. This time, imagine that you're at work. I don't care if you get paid for your work or not. Whatever it is that you pour your energy into, let's call that work today. You're busy with it. You're solving problems. You're communicating. You're dealing with things. You're over your desk or wherever it is that you work. You're intently focused on it. Someone walks up. You look up. Open your eyes. What's on your face? Did anybody learn something? Anybody see something you didn't expect in your face? Not necessarily. Okay, good. I'm going to tell you a story I call it my scary librarian story. And I must tell you this first, that my father was a career librarian. I've worked in libraries. I love libraries and I love librarians. So with that caveat, let me tell you this story. I was working at a librarian. Customer service is an important part of being a librarian, but librarians are thinkers, researchers, and intent on what they're doing. So you would walk up to the desk and most of the time they would be working and they would look up and look like this. Does that expression say, how are you? What can I do for you that might be helpful? Okay, I'm seeing Abhijit. What does that expression say to you, Abhijit?
Don't disturb me, I'm working.
Very good. Okay. So now that's what I call a default expression. Your face can be doing something that you might be completely unaware of that's communicating something that you do not wish it to communicate. So this is just an awareness. That's all. I'll tell you that in the Midwest, where I grew up, we get taught that our default expression has to be like Kalpana's is, like this. So I find myself, even when I don't mean to be, smiling. So again, it's just helpful. If I'm telling you a sad story and my mouth is doing this, that's not going to work very well. So just be aware of what your face, where your face wants to go naturally. Okay, we're going to move on. Now let's talk about two things, demonstrating emotion and authentic emotion. First, let's talk about demonstrating. What do I mean by that? I mean showing with your face. And you might or might not feel it deeply, but it is what is apparent. Sometimes it's exaggerated. In fact, most of the time, demonstrated emotion is exaggerated. It's kind of like, the word just went out of my head, but it's larger than life. Okay. When I Googled basic emotions, I came up with all kinds of answers of what that looked like. But I chose this one. And so, can you see my screen? You see a 9-pane thing? I see Declan nodding yes. Okay, we're going to go through them. I'm going to say the word, and I want you just to copy the expression that you see on the face, that face. Trust. Sadness. Happiness. Joy. Fear. Anticipation. Anger. Surprise. Disgust. Well done. You jumped into that without my warm-ups. We're going to back up now and we're going to warm up so that you can do that even more easily, because demonstrating motion is a lot about plasticity. If you're standing up, let's do the whole body and not just your face. If you're sitting down, do your best. All right, so let's just start by shaking things. Shake your hands out. Shake your feet out. And throw away an arm. Throw away the other arm. Throw away a leg. Throw away the other leg. Rotate your wrists. Rotate your elbows. Rotate your shoulders. Rotate your hips. Rotate your knees. Ooh, that's a little Elvis-like. And then your ankles. Okay, you're going to come up with a new dance even as we're doing it together. Okay, now let's move to the face. Okay, so make it as big as you can. Ah, open up everything. Ah, and then close it tight, tight, tight. Open. Ah, tight. Now chew. Really messy chew. Stick your tongue out. Back in. And Donald O'Connor in Make 'em Laugh does this thing. I can't do it. Who can make the one corner of their mouth go up and the other go down? Now that's something to work on. Yeah, face yoga, absolutely. Okay, what else? Okay, I want you to be aware, we're going to talk about this later, of where you might hold tension. The jaw is really common. the forehead is common. So maybe put your thumb in that jaw joint just a little bit and then loosen up. In fact, take your chin and go like this. And does it move to the side or is it too tight? Okay. The other thing that can get tight is your scalp. So rub it a little bit. Sometimes you can hold a lot of tension in your scalp. It's amazing. Okay. All this, what is it for? It's for being aware of where you are tight and being able to let it go. Because there's nothing like, for a minute, take tension in your whole body, tighten up everything, and then let it all go. Okay, now you really feel what it's like to feel relaxed. Okay, well done. Now we're going to have a game. I need 3 volunteers. Let's see. Mario, do you have your camera on? And let's see, Karen and Doris, will you volunteer? Can I voluntold you? And Madam Zoom Master, will you please bring them up on the screen with me, those 3 people?
Yes.
Or if you don't know who those are, other people, I need 3 volunteers.
Okay. Aaron, Mario, and Doris. Is that right?
Yep, that was right.
That you voluntold?
I did. I voluntold her.
Go.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an emotion. It's going to come onto the screen in a minute, and I want you to demonstrate it with your face. Are you ready? Here it is. Longing. Everybody else, watch them and decide who in your mind convinces you most of longing. Go ahead and type it in chat. For you, who is demonstrating longing most clearly? Mario and Doris seem to be tied so far. Okay. All right. And Doris, let me ask you, how did you generate that expression on your face?
I was trying to look forward to something that I really want. I think about it.
So you
and,
thought of something specific?
some food, that I really like.
Yeah. You don't have to tell me what. I just wanted to know if there was a specific thought. Okay. And Mario, how about you? How did you generate that?
Internalize an emotion and just put myself in a situation where I would be longing for something.
Okay. All right. Now, anybody who was watching, did you see something other than longing on someone's face? What did it look like to you? You can type it in chat, or you can raise your better to unmute and say it out loud. I know Karen's face was a little far from the camera to see clearly. Somebody says happiness. Mario looked hopeful. That's kind of close to longing, right? Stoicism. Karen looked wistful. Karen, you're muted. Doris
I
looked like
don't
she
know what
wouldn't
wistful
get-
is.
I can't read the whole thing. Doris looked like she wouldn't get what she was longing for. Oh, poor Doris. So she was longing for something, but it wasn't going to be attained. All right. So that is a particular kind of longing. Absolutely. Okay. Well done, guys. I need 3 more people, please. So Madam Zoom Master, you can just voluntold some people. You can just pick 3 people and put them on the screen. Karen, did you want to say something?
Can I do it again? Since my face was far from the camera?
That's all right with me.
All right, Karen, you got it. All right.
Okay, ladies, ready? Here comes your emotion. Ready? Terrified. All right, everybody who's watching, choose whose face is most convincing for you. And if it doesn't look like terror, decide what it does look like. and maybe type what you saw in chat. Karen universally got voted for that time. Let me say one of the things that Karen did, she exaggerated it by not using just her face, but by adding a gesture. And so that's kind of exponential. What did you see besides terror? Uncertainty, confusion, anger, longing. Okay, a delayed longing. All right. All right, now Sarah, and I should be wearing my glasses. I'm so sorry. Asta, how was that for you, and what were you thinking about? Or
It was hard.
it was hard. I could tell that it was hard. And do you know why?
To think of something specific, I think just right off the bat,
Mhm.
but it was easier to just focus on the emotion. Yeah.
I'm intellectual. Is that the emotion? Okay. Asta, do you want to add anything? What was that experience like for you?
It was difficult, like Sarah said. First of all, I needed to think of a memory that would cause fear in me and then concentrate on that fear for quite some time. So I had so much going on to practice with.
Okay, yep, and it can take a little while, and it can be as simple as just imagining. It doesn't have to be something that you've experienced, but just imagine yourself in the middle of a Stephen King movie or something. That'll be pretty terrifying right there. Okay, thank you, ladies. I want 3 more volunteers. This is just the 3rd time.
I've got 3 picked out already.
Okay, go for it.
All right.
Excuse me,
I'm just
gonna
going to
bend
bring you
over
guys
and
up.
pick up
You
something.
can all handle it. Trust me. You probably know who I'm picking on. You may hate me later, but there's one. There's one. And there's one.
Oh, we got the big important guys. Okay. All right, guys. Are you ready? Now, my challenge to you 3 is to do it, and not just do it, but to do it big. Okay, so demonstrating can be that exaggeration. So let's go for it. All right, ready for yours? Okay, gentlemen. Board stiff. Okay, who is most convincing to you? Solar Star? Solar Star's got movement as well as gestures. Declan, okay, he's got the gesture added. What does Abhijit look like besides board stiff? He actually looks a little afraid to me. Are you afraid, Abhijit?
No.
Abhijit looks like he's in a trance.
Which is a consequence of board stiff.
He's trying to still look at the speaker, but you could tell he's in a daze.
Okay, so there's a point about stoicism. There's a whole cultural layer of this, and I don't know if that applies to you, Abhijit, or not, but besides being a girl or being a boy and what's appropriate, then there's the cultural things about whether it's okay to show your emotions, and those are really thick and deep things, and it can be hard to get through them. Solar Star, you have Italian in you, right? So you're used to expressing, right? Okay. So what was that? You're an experienced performer, but tell me what your process was for getting to board stiff, Solar Star.
I just don't want to be here. This is not enticing me at all.
Okay.
And that's kind of-
So you just tuned into that, and, just showed. Okay.
Yeah.
Jacqueline, for you?
It was a memory. I just go back to the last staff meeting I had with my CEO boss.
Okay. Okay, that specificity is so key. Well done. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. And now let me ask the audience, what did you learn from that? Anybody have something to say about that?
I would
All right.
say adding movement or gestures really emphasizes what you're doing if you can do
Very
more than your
much.
face.
Very much. Good observation.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
more of the body language that spoke more than the expression, I think.
Yeah, Solazar pushed himself away and turned his body away,
Yeah.
showing that he was disengaging from the situation.
Okay, right. Now, if we'd been able to see Declan's drool, we would really know that he was bored stiff, right? So, Mario, did you have something to say? I saw your hand, then you went away.
Yeah, it goes about combination of emotions, of gesticulations, not just the face, but the extremities, like the body, the hands. It's about combination of emotions that we project the complex, not the classic 7 emotions, but the fear, terror, petrification, excitement is a combination of multiple emotions and feelings into one.
So it's complex. Thank you. Yes, and the more specific the thought, the more it can generate whatever emotion is associated with that circumstance. And like we noticed with Doris before, now she was imagining something that she might not get. So there was a little sadness in with her desire that you could see on her face. So emotions are not necessarily just
Mr. De La Porta seems to be more tense and anxious, not being bored. Am I
okay.
wrong in saying that?
Yeah, he was a little bit disgusted too. Oh my
Exactly.
gosh, who made me come to this event? Oh, okay. Yeah. And Karen Cornwall?
I noticed it's hard to hold the emotion on your face for a long time. It's like you can snap it in, but it faded. And Declan, he had to keep, right? It was hard to keep it steady.
Right. It takes continual thought generation, not the same thought. It has to kind of, you have to have a whole scene and it has to have a whole life in you to be able to continue. Yes. Solarsar?
Well, Yeah, Lindy, actually, I thought Abhijit was a polite bored. In other words, it was like he didn't really want to show you how bored he was, but he was bored. He wasn't there.
Yeah, I saw that too. I'm not going to admit to it, but oh my gosh, it let me out of here.
Lindy, I heard you mention the word stoicism. Is being indifferent, is that an emotion or lack of emotion?
Stoicism, I would say, is if you're taught to be stoic, you're taught to not express emotion. That's how I understand stoicism.
Being indifferent. I mean, pachyderm, you don't care.
There you go. Mildred?
I was going to say that I thought maybe Abhijit thought that the board was as in stiff as a board.
Oh, that works too. Yeah. We needed him to fall over so that we really got that message clearly. Boom, smack. Perfect. Great. So these are great observations. And it underlines too why you're standing up, those of you who are standing up, because your whole body can be a part of expressing emotion, not just your face. And if you've limited yourself to sitting down, all they can see of you is your face. And that's really limiting, okay? It doesn't allow you to pull on the whole thing that you've got. So get in the habit of standing up for whatever you're doing in Toastmasters. That's my encouragement. All right, now we're going to talk next about authentic or on-camera emotion. This, while demonstrated emotion might not be sincerely or deeply felt, it's largely expressed, but not necessarily. Like, for instance, shock. I wasn't really feeling shock, but it sort of comes across on the face, sort of. Authentic is when you do feel it deeply. And the expressing of it might be more quiet. We saw some people like Mario's expression of longing was a quieter, deeper thing. So it doesn't make it any less real. In fact, the truth is, what I'm talking about is making something more real. And why do I associate that with camera? Okay. How many people love movies? one of the reasons movies are so popular is that they take us right on that emotional journey. And why? Because close-ups are possible. Because we can see into the eyes of the characters we're watching, and we know exactly what's going on with them, even if they don't say anything. So a camera, you can't lie to the camera. You can pretend, but we will know you're pretending. Like I told to someone I was evaluating the other day, no amount of saying emotional words, I felt this, this, and this. If you aren't actually feeling it, we don't get it. So it requires not just retelling, but reliving in order to really communicate emotion. Now that's a whole different challenge, right? For humorous speeches, for tall tales, that demonstrating emotion, that exaggeration is totally appropriate and very effective. But for international speech contest, you need to have authentic emotion. You need to have ways of really feeling it. All right, now I have asked Preetha to help me. Will you bring Preetha on screen with me, please? Preetha has agreed to let me coach her just a little bit. And we didn't practice, so we'll find out how this is going to go. What I'm asking Preetha to do is to share a few lines that are an emotional situation, an emotional story, just a little bit to start. So take it away, Preetha. Give us what you've got.
Thank you, Lindy. So can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
The day I was dreading finally arrived. I was really nervous and had this weird feeling in my stomach. I heard someone say, "Step up now, Preetha." I closed my eyes and stepped up. I slowly opened my eyes. Yes, finally, I lost 2 pounds. This was my first weekly check-in at my weight loss support group.
Thank you, Preetha.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now, for those of you watching, what did you see as far as emotions? Lena. Oh, Lena's a timer. She's got her hand up because she's a timer. Who else? Go ahead, Alita.
Anticipation.
Patient. I saw a little worry, maybe a little fear mixed in there. What else? Anybody else? Concern. She built up the excitement. Yes, there was that anticipation of what was going to happen. Self-doubt. Yep, that showed for sure. So Preetha, in order to communicate all this, were you thinking about those emotions?
At time, yes, especially I would say the negative, the feeling of that nervous, I was thinking about that. Partly yes and partly no, I would say.
Yeah, but you were really reliving the circumstance.
I was reliving the memory that was there, but I don't know if I was thinking about the emotion more as going through the motion of what that scene was.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And that came through because it had all those different tones, and you know it's real when the emotion is colored with different things, because that's just the way we are as humans, right? Okay. Now,
It's
Preetha,
make more intense, not without exaggerating.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Go ahead again, Arnie.
Since he make it more intense without exaggerating.
Can't you make it more intense without exaggerating? Well, that's one of the things we're going to see. So that's great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, man.
And then I was going to ask, did you believe the emotion? And my answer is yes. And I gather from Arnie that he could use a little more to really feel it. Preetha, now take a step back and just do what we did again. Just kind of loosen up a little bit. And I want you to breathe into your belly. And those of you watching, you can do this too, okay? Breathe into your belly. Stop trying to look good. Let go of your hips. Now, guys, what we're doing is I want to talk about there's areas that we learn to protect ourselves. And it's an important thing, learning to protect yourself. But when you're wanting to emote, you have to peel those layers back. So being aware of where you're holding can be helpful. The hip joints is a common place. Okay, so just holding kind of tightly at the top of the hips is a common place to hold. So letting go of that. The stomach, if holding the stomach in, that can be a place of holding. Shoulders can be a place of holding. Scalp can be a place of holding. Jaw. There really isn't something that cannot be. These are just common areas. The forehead. Let me tell you about my most common place of holding is the forehead. I started performing in musical theater, and musical theater is all about demonstrating. It's all about big smiles and whatever else you're demonstrating, it's big and it's there. Okay. I have kind of narrow eyes, not remarkable eyes. And I've always been sorry about that. Okay. So when I raise my eyebrows, my eyes feel bigger. And I think it's more attractive. And I think it helps engage people more. All this is without thinking, right? So somehow along the way, I learned that using my forehead is a way to perform. When I took acting class, my acting teacher called me on that. She said, let go of your forehead. I got, what? Let go of your forehead. So then I went and said my lines just without it. And I don't remember what I was talking about. And I felt so blah. I felt like ugly and like there was nothing coming through. And it just didn't feel good at all to me. But the response was amazing. What did you see that was different about my voice, about anything that you saw that different? I wasn't talking about something emotional, so it wasn't a great example. But anyway, trust me that it was different in that circumstance. Voice modulation, yes, it drops kind of further into the body. Instead of being up here, it drops into the body. And really what you're trying to do is drop into your body, be in your body, where it feels scary, it feels exposed, it feels uncomfortable, it does not feel viewable to the public. If you're feeling that way, you're doing it right. So this is what we're after. So Preetha, I can't see all of you and I haven't known you long, so I can't immediately identify where you're holding, but I want you to do it again. Now that you've relaxed everything and breathe into your lower belly and let go of your shoulders and just start again.
The day I was dreading finally arrived. I was nervous and I had a weird feeling in my stomach. I heard someone say, "Step up now, Preetha." Slowly stepped up, opened my eyes. Yes, finally, I lost 2 pounds. This was my first weekly check-in at my weight loss support group.
Okay, those of you watching, what did you see that was different? And you can raise your hand and say it out loud. That's good if you do that.
The voice is different.
Voice different. What about the voice is different?
More emotion in the voice.
More emotion. Okay.
She spoke slower so that, emphasized each aspect of it.
And there was a more natural pace It was
Yeah.
more like she was talking for the first time instead of reciting a speech that she said
Right,
over and over and
right.
over again, right? Okay, yeah, very much. Anything else someone wants to say?
It was a lot easier to be there with her with the slower, lower voice. Yeah, like I could follow along and be
Right.
there. A
So
lot
it was,
easier.
it made her really present to that.
Mhm.
Rita, how did it feel?
The
I see you
gestures
going like this, so.
confirm the emotion in the words more. The gestures are more blatant and they more authentic to confirm the emotion in the words that she said.
Okay. Rita, what was your experience?
I think doing that relaxing sort of relaxed me. I felt more relaxed while saying it the second time, such that I could feel the emotions as I was expressing those words. Like I was nervous, and I paused, and I remember that feeling, you know, that feeling of anticipation just before stepping on the scale. So I was going through those emotions slowly. I could say, like, I was like allowing myself to feel it. And that was one thing I felt. And I think that came out in my voice too.
It totally did. It did. You did it very well. And that's not easy to do. Now we're going to add one layer. Those who teach about storytelling, and I'm thinking of Prez Vasilev, talk about doing the setting first thing and using senses to do that. So sight, sound, hear. What do you hear? What do you feel? What do you taste? What do you smell? Those bringing in senses help your audience to come into the scene quickly, but there's something else that it does. When you are working with emotion, you can use those to bring yourself more fully into the moment, because things like smell, the memory of a sound, these things can be very vivid. So Prita, I know it's not part of the outline, but can you start again with and add a couple of those things? Maybe the room smelled a certain way, or a temperature, or whatever comes to you.
The day I was dreading finally arrived. I wore my lucky jogger pants and yoga top. I could get that familiar smell as I entered the clinic. I heard some familiar voices and they said, "Hi, Preeta, are you ready?" I started feeling nervous. I got this weird feeling in my stomach. And I had said, "Come over here. It's time for you to step up now." And I closed my eyes and slowly stepped up. I could hear the cling, cling noise of the person recording all the information. "Yes," she said, "you've won. You did it. You lost 2 pounds." And I opened my eyes and then I saw, yes, I did it. I finally lost 2 pounds. This was my first weekly check-in at my weight loss support group.
Well done, Preeta. Well done. Well done. All right, who wants to make an observation about what they saw that time?
That was alive. That was really alive, completely. It was
Very
full.
much alive. Yes, thank you, Solarsar.
I think
You know,
she showed, sorry.
She added the excitement at the end, right? When I lost the 2 pounds, and that wasn't there before. So that was very natural.
Excellent, for sure.
She gave us more of what it was like before she entered the facility. We needed to know what it was like beforehand, and it was more of a coherent story, so it really connected.
Yes, it pulled you into the whole scenario, right? Rita, what was that like for you?
Yes, definitely. I felt more sort of, I don't know how to say it, but energized. I could feel that emotion was going through the cling cling came naturally, because that's what you hear that when they start, recording all the things and, adding the weights and, making you stand on the machine. And so I think that bringing those, the sight, sound, I didn't talk much about smell, but I just felt what I was wearing, which I always feel I have a lucky band where I wear when I go for weight check-in. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
So I think having those senses helped. Yeah. Using
really brought it alive. And one thing, when you're dealing with a 5 to 7 minute speech and you know that it goes 7 minutes and 20 seconds, you can't just be adding things left and right because you're going to run over, but you can swap something out. You can normally you talk about the sound and the color of the room, and maybe you're going to say, I could smell my nervous sweat, and if it's something new, anytime you add something new, whether it be a different pace or a different rhythm, a different tone, it brings you into your body more fully, and you're suddenly more fully in the moment. And the more you're in the moment, the more real it's going to be for your audience.
She followed more the rules of showing, not telling, using those sensory channels in her body, and she's awesome.
Yes, absolutely. She was totally reliving, not just retelling. Thank you, Preeta, for your generosity. Everybody give her a big round of virtual applause, please. Well done.
Thank you, Lindy.
All right, now I'm going to send you into breakout rooms for a quick exercise. I'm going to share my screen to show you the instructions. You're going to be paired up into twos. Let's see, I'm going forward. You can take a picture of this with your camera so that you have the instructions in the room, but I'll read it through. The person with the shortest hair is number 1. Person number 1 does like Preeta did, tells an emotional story in just 2 to 3 minutes, 2 to 3, sentences. So very short. Think of a circumstance and then just say 2 or 3 sentences about it, like my grandma's funeral. And then just say 2 or 3 things, 2 sentences or 3 sentences. Then you're going to switch. You're going to be demonstrating the emotion with your face. Then the switch, person 2 does the same exercise, and you're both going to take a minute to breathe, to tighten and release your body, and you're going to repeat it. And the second time is with as much authentic emotion as you can bring. All right, and then you're going to come back. You have 6 minutes in the room. And Madam Zoom Master, can you send those people now?
All right, if in just a moment you don't get thrown into a room.
We love our capable Zoom masters. They're amazing.
All right, we have a few of you not assigned, so let's see. Everything gets all switched around, so I'm just going to put some of you in some rooms.
Carrie, I will be in the main room. I don't want to go.
Okay, who was that?
That was Shobha.
Shobha, yeah. I think you are not assigned. So let's see. Here, we'll put you there. Just looking for rooms with only one person in them. Come on.
That's great. There's nothing more disappointing than arriving in a room and
I
finding out
know.
you're the only person there.
People might be coming back
kicked
out though.
Hey, Lindy, I'm sorry, I must go. I knew
Okay,
I would have
all
to
right.
leave early. I have to be on the road
Thank
right
you
now.
for being here.
Thank you. Great job. Bye.
All right. Jane.
We've got somebody without a partner.
Yep. Working on it.
I'm sorry. I'm just
Give me a moment. Sorry.
yeah, you're on it. Not telling you what to do. I apologize.
It's okay. It's okay. Oh, somebody asked for help. Abhijit, can you go into room 2 and see what's
Sure,
going on
sure.
with them?
Yes.
Let me put you in there.
Hello.
Oh, who is Copa? Who is he? For those of you who were able to do it, tell me something about what the experience was like. Jim, guest Jim, my friend, guest Jim.
Hello, yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
it was. Oh, is it me?
Yes, I mean you.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's okay.
You
Nice to
know,
meet you.
it was very interesting, especially the breathing, holding it, and then releasing and doing it again.
So you noticed the difference.
Yeah, there was a difference.
Okay, awesome. The other Jim, did you want to contribute, or were you just responding to my hail?
Well, strangely enough, I didn't get to do the exercise because my partner had to leave. So, but I thought of the scene that I would have done had we done the exercise.
Okay. Did you
Yeah.
do it for yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Karen, did you want to? No, let's see. Who's that? Mildred, did you want to say something about your experience?
Yes, I wanted to say the second time, when I wasn't exaggerating, I felt true emotion kind of flowing through me. It wasn't just me telling the story, it was me feeling the story.
Ah, beautiful. I'm so glad you had that experience. Really glad. Karen, how about you?
Yes, I was going to say that as well. I noticed that when you do the breathing exercises and you shake it out and you get rid of all the tension, it kind of opens you up and energizes you more. So you're more articulate, you're telling the story with more energy, more excitement. And what I learned about this whole exercise is that your facial expressions and your movements, they really magnify the words that are coming out of your mouth exponentially. This is really a great exercise.
That's great. Thank you. And somebody says in chat that they got less emotional the second time. And I want to say about that going into the letting go it's all unfamiliar, and it doesn't feel inside the way it's going to look outside. So keep experimenting with it, because it puts you into a more vulnerable, more fluid space, and it does take practice. So just keep at it. I'm going to ask my Zoom master to just post my handout that you can into the chat so that you can take it with you for later. I see that my esteemed colleague Mike Carr is on board here now. And I just want to close by saying that wherever you are, whether your face has a lot of plasticity or a little, whatever rules you're still living by about not showing emotion, all of that can change. All of that can change. Just like anything in Toastmasters, the key is doing it, practicing it, stepping up and doing it. And I encourage you to do a speech. Tell your club in the introduction that the point of this speech is for me not to use my face, for me to just let it be in my body. So they know what you're doing, and you just let yourself have the experience. Okay. Thank you all for coming, for participating, for being wonderful so early in the morning. You're champs. Madam Conference Chair.
Thank you, Lindy.
Thank you, Lindy. Thank you for this wonderful session of emoting. And I'm sure all of us have a takeaway from today on how to emote with just our face as well as using our body language. And especially the demonstration you showed with Preeta was awesome. And I think we'll have these little nuggets that we will carry for our international speeches later on. Thanks a lot. And thank you for making time for us early in the morning, and all fresh. You woke us up as well with gave us a boost with your exercises and emotions. Thank you, Lindy, for being here today.
Thank you very much, Lindy.
Yeah. So now we are moving on to our next session, which will be another workshop by another esteemed speaker. As Lindy mentioned, Lindy already mentioned his name. This speaker, he has worked in finance and senior leadership at 3 global financial firms. He has worked in banking for a Texas representative and 2 US senators. He has been featured in publications such as Forbes, Entrepreneur, Investopedia, and numerous podcasts and interviews. In 2020, he was named the world champion of public speaking through Toastmasters International. Yes. Now, coming to the speech today, do you have a great speech idea? But let's say the final product falls short. Often happens to all of us. And what if we want to take our presentations to the next level? He says editing is the key. Drawing on his 4 decades of professional and Toastmaster presentations, our speaker today will walk us through the speech creation process, focusing on what he has used to take a simple marginal presentation to the winning level, be it in Toastmasters, be it in business, or be it in life. Let's welcome Mike Carr, 2020 World Champion of Public Speaking on screenplays.
Oh, thank you, my dear friends. It is so great to be with you in sunny California. I am in cloudy Austin, Texas. So I hope you all are doing very well. I'm excited for the conversation we're going to have today, and I would like for it to be a conversation. First, I want to start out by saying it is so amazing to share a stage with Lindy Maclaine again, one of my truly favorite humans in the world. And when I say favorite humans, I mean, she is, if you don't know her and know her heart, she is one of the Creator's great humans and lovely humans on this earth. So that is a joy. I am sad to be here with you in one way. That means that you don't get to hear from Aaron Beverly, who is so great at this topic. And I would encourage you to go find his website, email him, get in one of the sessions where he does this topic again, because he is phenomenal and he is also a great human. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to share with you my perspective and what has worked over the years, but we want to make it a conversation. Wanted to have that disclaimer here at the beginning. So I will share my screen out the beginning. All right. There we go. Do you mind giving me a thumbs up if you can see that? And it seems like that you all have frozen for me, but thumbs up. Can you see that? Just
We are not seeing. Yeah, we are seeing it now.
Okay. So welcome to Championship Editing. This is what we are going to spend our time together doing. First, I want to offer just a little brief intro into what we're doing. And that's about 5 minutes. Then I'm letting you all know right now, I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to ask you, what do you want to get out of this session? And I would appreciate if you'd be thinking about during this intro, what is it that you'd like to get out of this session? So you can come on, let me know what it is you're looking for, and then I can make sure that I'm answering those questions as we walk through. Then following, you're telling me what you're wanting to look for. Then we're going to talk about tools, some tools that I have used and I've seen others use to take a marginal speech into a championship winning speech. And that could be the Toastmasters contest, that could be business in our businesses, or that could just be in our personal relationships, anytime we're doing presentations that way. Following the tools, we're going to break it open for more Q&A. So if you have any questions from that, and then I'll just do a brief wrap up at the end. And I hope we find our time together very productive, and you get out of this what you are wanting, and it adds value to your presentations and your life. Fair enough? That's fair. Do you mind? Thumbs up. We'll move forward. Very, very good. This presentation, this time is about you. This is about you. It's not about me, except to the point where I have been where you are now. And the reason I believe I've been where you are is that if you had no problem with editing, if you were completely satisfied and happy with the speeches and presentations that you're getting, you're able to give as many as you want in any capacity where you give presentations. I don't believe you would be here. I think that you would say, oh, I can do something different on a Sunday. I don't need to hear this. So I believe I have been where you are or you have been, because I've been in places before where I delivered a speech that I'd worked really hard on, I'd been incredibly creative with, and it just landed flat. It just didn't go where I wanted it to go. Or I've had a speech that I crafted and it still didn't seem to work when I got in front of the audience. So this is about you, and this is about what we can do. If any of you know my story, I've been in Toastmasters now 25, 27 years and have been in the contest more than 20 times. It was not until 2013. I'd always gone to district. I had lost along the way. But in 2013, I sat down with David Brooks, the wonderful David Brooks here in Austin, and I sought his help. He had won the International Speech Contest. I said, would you coach me? And I can send you my video. I can send you a copy of my speech. He said, no, no thanks. Just send me the written version. I said, well, don't you want to see how I present it? Don't you want to see what I come across as? And he said, no, I do not. Send me the scripted out written version. So I said, okay, I sent it over to him. Then we got together right over there. Actually, can you see it? I'm just right over there. We got together at it wasn't a Cracker Barrel. It was it doesn't really matter. It was a restaurant. I'll think of it a little bit and I'll throw it in there. Cheesecake Factory. It was a Cheesecake Factory. We sat together at a Cheesecake Factory. We sat around a booth, middle of the day, and David walked me through how he edited my speech. That was the first time I made it to the international semifinals. And I began to get a glimpse of what editing could do. And then I completely forgot it. The next year entered the contest. I came in second at the semifinals, came in second to Kingy Biddle, who came in second at the finals. And the next year I re-entered the contest. I knew I had this great outline. I felt good about the speech. And I felt like it was more organic when I was just speaking from the outline, and I lost at area. I had forgotten my own lesson about editing, about what I learned from David Brooks. So I went back again, tried it out, did more editing. Then in 2015, made it back to the semifinals again, but it was only after all of the editing process. Editing, my friends, is the key. You can have a great story, great presentation, and the difference between editing it down where it's tight, where it's not using more words than you need to use, certainly is the key. So now I'd like to open it up to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'd like to hear from you. What is it that you would like to get out of today? What questions do you have about editing? And we're going to keep those in mind as I go through. And I recognize my pen is over there, so I will disappear for 2 seconds and I'll be right back. All right, as promised. I see hands. Arnie, why don't we start with you?
Mr. Carr, what does editing involve in its covers, and at what stage in your speech crafting do you do editing?
Great question. I'm going to say it back to make sure I got it. What does editing involve, and at what stage? Great question. So we'll talk about that. What else? What else for today? I see Philip. I see your hand virtually raised.
Yeah. Are you going to? Is it about following the emotional journey that the script will be describing?
So let me again say this back. Is the editing about defining the? Am I saying this right? Defining the emotional journey?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Great question. Okay. Is the editing about finding the emotional journey? Excellent questions. So yes, Anna, I see your hand up.
Is editing always involving another person to edit your work?
That's one of the things I had planned on talking about, and that's an important topic. We're going to spend some time on that. So editing involving another person. Excellent. All right, and Leanna.
So for one of my speech, I got feedback that we should not include something which is not contributing to our speech. So what I want to convey, that is not getting conveyed properly. That's why audience feel like it is not contributing to my speech. So how to identify such points that which we feel like it is important in our speech, but audience is not getting connected to that and they feel it's unnecessary?
That is a fantastic question, and if I'll tell you very quickly, that happened for me in 2013. The story, I was in love with two stories, and at about division, I got feedback that the story I loved, I needed to drop it because it didn't contribute. So yes, we'll want to talk about that, and I'm gonna. So what do we cut, and how do you know what does not contribute? Excellent question. And if I don't go back to that at Q&A, remind me. Frank and Lois is the story that I had to cut, and I'll tell you more about that. All right, I see Jim. I think your hand is up. So I see Jim and Karen and Malcolm. If there are any others, feel free to get in the queue. But Jim, I don't see any others. Jim, why don't you go next?
Okay, thank you. I have to give a 30-minute presentation this week, and I am struggling with having enough content to fill those 30 minutes. So my questions are not so much what to eliminate. I'll get to that point, but what to add to make my stories fuller, to make my presentation fuller, to make it more powerful, like I want it to be. I guess to put it in a sentence, is editing just as much knowing what to add as knowing what to cut?
Ooh, that's really good. I hadn't thought of that perspective. That's why I love doing the questions at the beginning, because you all think of things that I don't. I hadn't thought of it that in that concise a way. That's a good question. I need to think about that. I wrote that down.
Okay.
And the simple answer on that is, I believe the answer in that is, as long as you've got your content there, your bullet points, I think stories are the answer to your question, but you're asking about how to fill those out. Let's maybe talk about that a little bit more in the second Q&A, and I'll go through, but that's excellent. Thanks for bringing that up. What do you add? That's really good. That's really good. Thank you. All right, Karen, what's yours?
So Mike, I have found that speeches, when you're giving them over and over, like for a competition, they evolve. And I could never guess, you know, the second version, what the sixth version would look like. So to me, editing is not a one-time thing. It's a continuous process. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And if you can shorten that process, that'd be really awesome.
Yeah, so we want to talk about that when we talk about, I want to talk more about that when we talk about the bridge of trust. That'll make more sense here in about 20 minutes. But that's an excellent point. I can answer though quickly. How do you shorten that process? Unfortunately, you cannot. And actually, I would suggest you don't want to. But we'll talk about that again in a little bit too. Excellent question. Excellent. All right. All right. Malcolm, what is your question?
Yes, thank you. So I understand the importance of editing to make a huge difference in the speech delivery. I'm wondering if it's possible that you can show us 2 examples of text. It doesn't have to be the whole speech, but at least part of the text, the essential parts, so that we can see the text before edit and the text after edit. And also if you can elaborate about the thought process behind the editing. I think that will be most valuable. Because there's a thinking I'm imagining. So you know, okay, this is how I can strategically edit my text so I can perform at a higher level. Thank you.
That's good. I'm prepared to talk about. I'm prepared to talk about. So let me say this. So show examples, but then also, what was the other piece that you said about how?
Yeah. So show an example of before and after edit text, and also explain to us the thought process going into the editing. Because I believe if we know what to look for, what to think, then that will help us during the process of editing.
We're going to talk some about thought process, definitely. And let me think about, I don't have 2 side-by-side text examples. So let me think about how I have an end result example, but let me think about how we talk about some of the side-by-side. Excellent question. Excellent question.
Thank you.
All right, Lillian.
Hey, hi, Mike. I know that Toastmasters is all about speeches and all, but I wanted to see if you might be able to address editing a speech versus editing maybe a written story that you would hope to publish. What the differences or similarities might be between those kind of things. Yeah.
Editing speech versus written, and so that's great. I don't know if you saw my full bio, but my wife is a best-selling author. She also is an editor, and she also does a lot of ghostwriting. So she and I have talked extensively about speech versus writing, and we can talk about a lot of these examples they're very similar in both the speech world and the writing world. So based on your question, I'll blow that out on the writing side as we go through also. Thank you. That's excellent.
Thank you.
All right. Yusha, am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yes, Usha Narayanan. So my question is, when you get contradicting feedback from different cultures, how do you choose what to keep and what to eliminate?
Oh, that's a great question, because that is what ultimately took me to Mark Brown whenever I was in the contest. And I'm going to be in India in 2 weeks speaking at their conference. And so have spent a lot of time asking questions about, does this story lands in the West, does it land in Chennai? So that's a fantastic, and increasingly because of this right here, because of Zoom, we are able to have relationships, speak into each other's lives around the world, and increasingly that becomes a heavy piece. I'll give you my disclaimer. I wish That could be a whole 90 minutes right there. I think you will not be satisfied with the amount of time I'll be able to address that, but I wish I could. I think it's a fantastic thing that we all really can be looking at. And I'd say at some point I'll throw up my email address. If we really don't get into that depth, feel free to email me. I'd love to continue the conversation. Very important question. Okay, culturally. Excellent, excellent. All right. So Vicky, yes.
Hi, Mike. I had a question for you, or maybe a two-part question. Like, first question is, like, how would you know you've done editing? And then the second one is, I always struggle with editing as because in the past we heard comment that you write for the eye versus you write for the ear. So while we're editing without practicing, how would I know I'm actually writing like for the ear for other people to hear?
Oh, such a good nuance. The simple answer is how you know when you're done. I'll tell you, my brother-in-law is a leader of a large company, and one of the things he has said for a number of years is projects are never completed, they're only abandoned. So I would actually, again, kind of similarly earlier, I would suggest really we're never done. And that's because every time we edit, we're always growing. The speech grows, it improves. And that's why I would suggest that we really never want it to be done. We always are learning new things. We always are hearing interesting new speakers, and they do something. You say, oh, I wonder if I could use that in my speech over here. So I would suggest that it's never done. Now in contest speeches, I ran out of time. I knew that editing was done for the next contest because the contest came and I needed to give it as is. But even now, as I speak to industry, then that speech is always evolving. So hopefully it's always improving. So that's one. Now the eye versus ear, let's maybe talk about that a little bit later. That's a really fun nuance to think about. So thank you for the question. Very good. Leanna, did I see you had your hand raised again?
She's
Or
your
maybe-
timer. She's there so you can see the timer.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you very much. I will quickly look through the chat to see what questions. Great session, Lindy. I see that a lot, and I agree. What are the winning structures of a speech? How to amp up the speech, notch it up. All right. So what we'll do is spend some time talking about all these things in the tools and then wrap back around and use some of the thoughts that I've seen work successfully, and we can dig a little deeper in about 30, 40 minutes. Fair enough? Thank you. Thank you. Well, you all wonderful humans, this is going to be really exciting. I'm already learning from you, and I hope it's vice versa. I think this will be a very fun conversation. I'm going back to the picture I showed you, and it all begins with the tools that we use. The first one I would suggest is this right here that you see on your screen, that we all need to have separate rooms. And what does that mean? Separate bedrooms? We need to, if you Google separate rooms and put up images, it talks about sleeping in separate bedrooms, and that's not at all what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is something that I read from a comedy coach, Greg Dean, some years ago, whenever I was seeking to really build out comedy. And he wrote, you always want to create in one room and edit in a different room. So visually, you have one even visual, the air you breathe, the feeling that it is in one room that you walk in, and it immediately triggers your body that you're in creative mode. I've heard of individuals, different hats they wear, but he suggested rooms. And then you walk into your editing room and it clicks on a different part of your brain that begins to take a look at what really do I need here and what do I not. And when I read that, it reminded me of a preacher that I knew way back whenever I was in junior high or middle school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a guy named Marvin Phillips. He was one of Zig Ziglar's contemporaries, so he was quite a bit older than I was. But every single time that I would hear something that he talked about, his stories were amazing. Here I was as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, and I was mesmerized by the talks of this 50, 60, 70-year-old as I grew and as he grew. Because I liked presenting and I liked speeches, I called him one time and I said, hey, do you mind if I come over and watch how your speech process goes? He says, sure, I'm going to be writing my next sermon on Tuesday. Why don't you come over? I arrived thinking I would find him in his study, and his wife met me at the door and said, oh, no, Marvin is not yet in the editing process. He's still in the writing process, so he's down by the lake. Now, at the time, that really confused me because I thought, okay, writing process at the lake, wait, how does that all go together? But pretty soon he came walking back and sat down with a little tape recorder that he had recorded. And as he played it, and I sat there and watched, he wrote out what he had just talked into this small little tape recorder as he walked in nature. Then, when he had it all written out, he started striking, changing, making arrows everywhere else. And I watched then his sermon evolve right there. I heard what was on the tape recorder, and it was just pretty random. Some stories, it did follow an interesting line, but it went off on tangents. Then I saw the sermon on Sunday, and it was tight. It followed a linear progression. It was funny. It had humor in it. When I read Greg Dean's Having Two Separate Rooms, I was reminded again that it is so vitally important that we separate our editing process from our creative process, because if we try to do both together, each one gums up the other and has a really difficult time. A lot of people have said they like the creativity of my speech Blue that I was able to use to go from club to the international semifinals the year I won in 2020. And if you remember that speech, or if you never saw it, it uses the word blue as an anchor all the way through the speech. I was wearing something blue. I talk about my friend whose name is Maria, and it used that as an anchor all the way through using blue. And people had asked, well, okay, how that felt very creative. How did you come up with that? And it was this 2-room idea that happened then also. I just happened to be driving back. My wife gets motion sick, so she has to drive. And I was reading Mark Manson's book, and where he talks about a friend of his who passed away, unfortunately, when he was in high school in a drowning accident, and what he learned from that and how it changed his life, and how it caused him to start thinking, I don't want to worry what everybody else thinks about me because it could end any day. I just put that book aside, and as we're driving and I'm seeing, going by my window, all this beautiful nature coming from Arkansas back into Texas, I started thinking, what is my version of that? Have I ever had any experiences that taught me things like that? And this memory that my brain had pushed out of the way came back, that I had lost a dear friend also. Back whenever I was in middle school, about the same time I was watching Marvin Phillips write his speeches in 2 separate rooms. As I thought about that, her name was Maria, and I thought, what was unique about Maria? Well, she had a heart condition, which made her pale skin blue. blue, that's an interesting concept. What else is blue? Well, lakes are blue. The sky is blue. My mood could be blue. All of this, and I pulled out my journal. I just started scrolling things down in the car as I'm riding there in the passenger seat with nature flying by me at 75 miles an hour. All of this creativity poured out on many pages of my journal. Most of that I could not use. We drove back into our driveway in Austin. I walked immediately into the office and I pulled up my laptop and I started typing furiously all of what was in that journal onto the page. It was as fast as I speak, I need to, in a contest speech, I need to have about 800 words because I speak at about 114 words a minute with pauses. And so I needed to have about 800 words. When I got all of that story out, it was well over 2,000 words, maybe 2,500 words. So a lot of it had to be cut. Now, I would say it's Tim, right? I'm looking for your name here. I think when we really focus, Jim, when we focus on the story and we think about putting the audience right back in the place where we were, whenever I was putting myself there with Maria, the first time that we had walked away and she pulled me over behind a bus and laid a kiss on me. When I started thinking about all of the things in that day, the smells, if you think about the senses that are around, we were under a tree. It was a cherry blossom tree. I could smell that. It was a sunny day. She pulled my arm, the tug of that, the feeling in my nervous system as I saw her face getting closer to mine. All of those things can build out a story. And we'll maybe talk about that some more, but I think if we think about all of the senses, especially olfactory senses, because if you think about a perfume that you smell and it immediately puts you right back somewhere in your life that maybe your dad wore, or a first girlfriend, or your wife on her wedding day, or the first romantic encounter, just anything that your third grade teacher whom you may have had a crush on. Those smells take us right back more, a food that maybe someone special made. And that's one thing we leave out a lot. When we add in several of those details, I'm hoping you can see, even as I'm talking about this story right now, there are a lot of details that I put in that a lot of people would consider extraneous. Nature flying by me at 75 miles an hour, looking out the window. A lot of times that is what causes an audience to remember the point that we actually made. And the point that I want to actually make in telling you this story is having two separate areas, whether it's driving in a car and then editing in a home office, or being creative at the lake and editing in our bedroom, or in different rooms in the house, or at an office, or at home. Having two separate rooms makes our editing process that much better. All right. And is that understandable? Does that work? Well, very good. That's our tool number one. Our tool number two is, when it comes to editing, we absolutely must. You must edit. Now, I will tell you, my friend who was asking about speech writing versus speech making versus editing, this is the number one point that my wife talked about when we talked about this subject, is so many people in speeches, we want to speak from an outline. We want to, and I put myself in this category, we want to speak from an outline. We want to write out and make our rough draft, our first draft, the draft. And you'd be surprised how many authors who have book contracts with major publishers, they really just want to turn in one draft and let that go. And it just never is the best. So when it comes to editing, we absolutely must. We absolutely must. Early on, when I first started doing speeches, I was doing financial seminars. I'd started a financial planning practice, and I decided to look for new clients by offering free financial seminars in my community. So I started doing those, and I started winging them because I could speak from the cuff. It was like 1 hour-long table topic. I had slides that I was clicking through, but it was like an hour-long table topic. And I noticed that I did not get the number of people signing up to meet with me afterward. I didn't get what some of my peers did at other parts of the country that were doing the same thing. So I came back and I edited tightly what I would do, because here I was doing all these free seminars, and you only have so long to be able to build a business, or else you run out of cash flow. So I got scared. I tightened it down, and I almost knew word for word the next seminar. And all of a sudden I had all these people sign up to meet with me afterward. And then I got cocky and I started winging it again. And again, I saw the number of people who were motivated to action shrink. That's what it taught me, that we need to edit every single time. When it comes to that, we must edit. Tom Singer, who is a Toastmaster in Austin and is also a professional MC and professional speaker, says this every time. He says, I can tell how well I have edited by the number of people that approach me at the end of a speech to hire me again. Editing, so that's the second rule. The second tool is, when it comes to editing, we just don't deliver our best product unless we edit. And so I would suggest we must. Tool number 3 is, I'm afraid that you forgot something. And it's not just you, my friend. It is me. It is so many people around that we forgot something. And what we forgot is this little guy right here. Don't you love that picture? I'm just going to click stop share just to see your faces. Oh, you're smiling as much as I am. Okay, I'll reshare again. This guy, I just love him. And I don't know where he comes from, where he lives. I wish I could say he was my nephew or she, I'm assuming the overalls, but you never can tell. But what do you see? I'll just ask you, you can answer or not answer. What do you see in this picture?
Full of joy.
Full of joy. Yeah. Excellent.
Lindy Maclaine practicing emotions.
Practicing emotion, right. And I think I heard someone, go ahead. Excitement, right.
He looks fascinated at seeing himself in the mirror.
You're there, that's right. And that elicits joy and excitement. And one of the answers that I get in in-person seminars is support. The hand on his back, helping him be there. The point that I want to make with this slide is, when I say, I'm saying it to you and to me, that you've forgotten something, is we as speakers, and I see this especially in Toastmasters, because we as Toastmasters, the vast majority of us sign up to be able to improve our communication skill. Communication skill in leadership, in business, and other reasons, but we sign up because we are wanting to, in some way also, and I put myself in this category, I signed up for Toastmasters because there's a part of it that I like the performance aspect of it. I enjoy getting up in front of people and saying, hey, here's a story, and I hope that it really entertains you. And when we fire off on our speeches, many times we forget someone. We forget the audience. We go down the line of a speech about ourselves and we forget the audience. And I will tell you, I did this from the very beginning of the contest that I was in. I've been doing contests for almost my whole time in Toastmasters, back 27 years-ish. And I remember my first contest speech, it started out talking about my football coach, and he was saying, that's not good enough. And I went into the weight room and I talked about just trying to do a little bit more every day. And I told this speech. And then at the very end, I told the audience, here's what you can get from this. But the audience spent 7 minutes and 15 seconds wondering, why is he telling me this? When we look at this little guy on the screen, it's great to remember we all have a favorite word in the English language, and it is our own name, or any language that we speak, and it is our own name. Psychologically, the way that we are built for survival has us to be self-focused many times. And so our audience is constantly asking us, what's in it for me? And when we take off on our own story, we forget something. We forget that the audience wants to have this experience that you see on the screen, to see themselves and see a new nuance of themselves and be delighted, be overjoyed. We, my friends, we are the hand of support on the back, showing our audience, this is who you can be. This is who you are. It's so interesting. Whenever I saw Darren LaCroix speak at an NSA chapter one time, and he brought about this concept. He said, go back and look at my championship winning speech and count how many times I say you in the first paragraph. And we went back and looked. It is multiple times. That came out of editing. He showed an example of a later speech where he started out telling a story, and his coach, Mark Brown, said to him, or there was another coach in there, if I remember correctly, that said, you have to focus on the audience. You need to be saying you to the audience. And there is research out there that the number of times that we say you in the first part of a presentation, it engages the audience more. And it's because we are all that little baby staring at the mirror. How many of you, maybe by show of hands, have heard of Donald Miller? Anyone? Donald Miller wrote Story Brand, and that's a book that I would recommend if you want to improve your stories. Jim, this might also be another. I know you're have this speech coming up pretty quickly, but Donald Miller has a international story structure that he talks about. And what he shows is that so many stories in human experience throughout millennia have followed this very structure that you see on your screen. You have a character who has a problem, who finds a guide, who gives them a plan, calls them to action. And if they follow the guide's action plan, it leads to the success that they can have. But if they don't follow it, it leads to failure. What Donald Miller says in a sales process or a story process, and he does a lot around company branding, but I have found that this works so well for our speech presentations that many speakers that I see, they assume that at point number one, they are the character. Another way to say that is a hero. It is the hero's journey. They assume that they are the hero of the story, or even if they don't assume that, the way they tell the story is they are the hero of the story. And immediately the audience gets left behind. But what Donald Miller says is to companies, to salespeople, to business leaders, to presenters, that your audience is always the hero of the story, is always the character, and they have a problem. So to start with focusing on the audience and the problem that that audience might have, all of a sudden then the audience knows what's in it for me. You may not remember this, but that's the reason why I began this entire presentation with saying this is about you. And I believe I have been in your shoes, because if your presentations were exactly the way you always wanted them to be, you wouldn't be here. And I have also been at a place where I've had presentations that have fell flat, because I want, and I believe we want, the audience to always be the hero of the story, because we don't leave them behind. The audience has a problem. Who meets a guide? My friends, we are the guide. We set ourselves up to show I have walked that path before and I can help you get there. And then here is the plan that I can give you. And if you will take action on this plan, then you will have success. But if you decide it's out of your own agency to ignore the plan, there is a possibility or even a probability of failure. Now, I take this a little bit further in my own speeches. If you saw, again, the speech Blue, the year that I won the contest, and then the final winning speech, the librarian, Mrs. Montgomery, I actually like to make that guide another person. So what I tried to do in Blue is the audience was the hero, and the plan was the problem is we were all in the middle of COVID. The guide was my friend Maria. And so I get to be the conduit, sharing what I learned from this guru and pass it on to the hero. In The Librarian and Mrs. Montgomery, the hero had a problem, which was we get discouraged by results that don't show up. And so I tried to introduce the audience to the guide, who was Mrs. Montgomery, who reminded me that victory is in the try, it's not in the results. And so by introducing you to Mrs. Montgomery, hopefully you are not discouraged by a lack of results and you keep trying, because that's where results show up. I do a speech for industry talking to leaders about listening. Strange, you'd think, leaders not listening to us. Has anyone had that experience? Have you ever been in a place where the leader doesn't listen to what you're saying, but really believes that, he knows exactly what the right answer is already? I know it's a strange concept. None of us have ever been there, but, believe it or not, they need to listen to that. My dad.
Why is it a failure? Why is it a failure, not happily ever after?
Say that again.
The last one, failure. Why failure, not happily ever after?
So success or failure?
Yeah, why failure, not success?
Well, if in the story structure, if the guide gives the plan and the hero chooses not to follow it, then the guide is really only doing best by the hero to say, if you don't follow this plan, then you're probably going to continue to get the same results that you've always gotten and still have the problem and still be stuck. But if you do follow this plan, then that's where you have happily ever after, or success. That we've called that success on the screen. So happily ever after would be that place number 6 on the screen. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Carr.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Very good. So Story Brand and the Story Brand Guide, whenever I'm doing any training with companies, then I try to tell them I'm a wisdom retailer. I've done the reading, so you don't have to if you don't have the time, and bring in some of these concepts as we go along. But there are some great resources out there on story structure that can really help us remember that if we fire off on our own story and we don't bring the audience with us, then we leave them and they probably never join us again. In the editing process, I wouldn't suggest that in the creative process. In the creative process, pour your story out that hits you. pour the story out that you think of that makes your point. But in the editing process, that's where we can go back in and say, okay, am I tying this to the audience early? And consequently, you can also, that's also a great place to go in and say, where can I add in humor to the speech? That's tool number 3. Tool number 4 is the trust bridge that I alluded to earlier. This is what this picture that I'm calling on the screen, this picture, I'm calling it the trust bridge because it's a beautiful bridge in Germany, just an incredible, idyllic place. But it really worked well for the point that I want to make, and it speaks to those questions early on, those of you who said, do I get someone outside of me to edit? And what's that process that I go through? I would suggest if you look at this bridge that's on your screen, it is an analogy. On the left-hand side, on the left-hand shore, is you editing all by yourself. On the right-hand shore, it is you getting as much feedback as you possibly can and opening up that editing to as many editors as you possibly can. What I would suggest to you is the place to live is on the bridge, somewhere in the middle, that you have to trust your editors, trust those outside of you, but also trust yourself and have a limited number of editors. You want more than just yourself because we don't know what other perspectives are out there. And this speaks to the cultural aspect as well. The more speeches that we're giving outside of our state or outside of our region of the country, certainly as we move internationally, we want to get more perspective, but we need to limit it before it's just a cacophony of noise coming at us and we really don't know what to do with that. I'll give you an example of this, and this speaks to the writing process. My wife has a writing client who has the kind of reach. Her last book almost went New York Times bestseller. She has that kind of reach, and they're working together to try to get the next book to go New York Times. But this writing client is convinced that she needs to write for everyone. So when they get on these calls, they'll be on a call and the writing client will be on a call with my wife, Julie. And all of a sudden she will conference in this other author or writer or business coach who comes in, who has strong opinions about what that book needs to say and how that book could be a bestseller. And it's a different person every time. And so what is happening is this book has multiple voices and it lacks cohesion. Now we struggle with this a lot in Toastmasters because feedback and evaluation, especially for early speakers, is invaluable. Getting multiple perspectives and multiple pieces of feedback is really important. And when you get into a contest, then that only ramps up higher. Those of you who have ever been in a contest, when people know you're representing their area or their district or their division, then they want it to be the best they can. And they do not mince words, do they, Lindy? They come in and they tell you, yeah, this part was okay, but this part really sucked. You need to get rid of this. But then you have somebody else come in and say that part that somebody else said sucked. That was your best part. And so all of a sudden you're just whipped back and forth. And I was coaching someone who was in the contest and started going down the road of the humorous speech contest. And I gave that warning, but she really wanted it to be the best speech it could be and listened to all this feedback, tried to incorporate everything. And by the time she got to the next level, the speech sounded nothing like her own voice. And so it really had been drained of its power. Any pieces of those feedback would have made the speech better, but all of them made it worse. So that's why we have to exist on the bridge. We have to find people who have gone where we've gone before, I would say if you're in a district, especially around the world, I can give you ideas what is good and what Toastmaster judges generally vote for, but someone in your district who has won that district a time or multiple times has a perspective that I don't have. And so if you and I were working together, then I would say you absolutely want to find someone who knows that district and knows what tends to resonate in that district. I know what resonates in District 55 and maybe in Region 3, but outside of that, I had to go grab Mark Brown, who had been on the world stage and had been involved in listening to what continued to go further every time. So hopefully that speaks to who you ask to edit, how many editors you get. It does remind me of, I did musicals years ago in high school, and we were doing the musical Once Upon a Mattress. It was my first part that was a little bigger than just being in the chorus, where I would say, yay, and turn to my friends and say, hubbub, 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 or banana, apple, banana, apple. So I had a speaking part, and we were trying to work out this scene. I was all excited about it. We do it one way, and I say, oh, what if we did it this way? So then we try it another way. Oh, that would remind me of something else. What if we do it this way? We do it another way. And the director of the show was brilliant, a guy named Dan Carr. And he stopped me and he said, hey, Mike, I can tell you the exact best way to run that scene right now. I said, well, okay, yeah, what is it? He said, pick one way and perfect it. And that's the answer. There are a ton of great editors out there. The best way that you can make your presentation the best it can be is to make quality decisions on a few editors that have diverse backgrounds, and then listen to them. And so when we go and we practice a speech in front of a Toastmaster club and we get all of that feedback, it's good to take it. Some of it you just let move on by. It's not for you. Some of it you say, oh, that's pretty interesting. But then you take that back to your main editors and you say, I heard this. What do you all think about that? And then you trust them and you trust yourself. You stay on that bridge of trust. That gives you the very best editing process. And then finally, we want the speech. This is tool number 5. I would suggest you want your speech to be luxuriously minimalistic. That's what this picture is. This room has been made both luxurious and minimalist. So look at that picture just for a minute. Look at some of the details and the aspect, the detail of placement. And don't answer me right now, but maybe write down, what are some of the things you notice that make that as beautiful as it is, as striking as it is? All right, feel free to shout out, what are some things that you notice that make that striking?
Just the simple, basic, almost universal colors that match with everything.
All right, simple, basic, universal colors match with everything. Let's bridge over to what is the speech version of that? Simple, a simple idea, right? And I'm looking at myself. I'm going to say this to myself on the screen because I am the worst at this. Too many of us, Mike, try to say everything. We act like this is the last time we're ever going to be able to speak. We try to say too many things. So in the editing process, we want to simplify, simplify, simplify. The first thing that we do by simplifying is we want, no matter if it's a 90-minute message, a 30-minute message, a 7-minute Toastmaster message, or a 2-day seminar, one central message. We want to have one central message. And yes, that's hard, but we have to simplify, 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 because our audience will not remember multiple messages. We can give multiple examples surrounding one message, but we have to have one message. So you said it's simple. You said basic. Is that right? So let's think universal colors. When we are editing, we want to be looking for those universal truths that have come up in our story. Those universal truths that have come up in our creative process. I don't know if you can see this hat back here on my bookshelf. You mind giving me a thumbs up if you can see that where I'm pointing to right there, maybe too small, right? That's my granddad's cowboy hat that he wore around everywhere. He built houses around Tulsa, Oklahoma in the United States. Then he started building shopping centers. He was just a small businessman. He had this concept that he didn't even really go to college. He didn't study. He played American football in college, but didn't really go to class. He certainly didn't study home building or shopping center building. He just had this concept that if anybody out there can do it, I can figure out how to do it. But I keep that hat right there to remind me of the universal truths that are pervasive throughout the world. The love of a child of his or her grandfather, the love of families, what families teach us. That's what is luxuriously elegant about this. Universal truths, universal basics. Those are things that we can keep in mind. There's a rule about comedy that if you can say something, if you tell a joke in 12 words, it's a lot more funny in 8 words. And if you can tell it in 6 words, it's a lot more funny in 5. That even just by editing into brevity, we make our speeches more powerful. That's one of the great benefits of the 7.5-minute Toastmaster speech, or you're disqualified. Is the beauty is in the constraints. Think about Shakespeare's sonnets. Iambic pentameter, not very long. But you had an artist who created beauty because of the constraint. That's one of the things that I tell the industry all the time. I'll ask leaders, I'll say, why are you not in a Toastmaster club? Because you come out and you vomit all these words that you've been thinking about. And there's a lot of and while you're trying to think about the next thing to say out on your team, whenever you could just go practice a 7-minute or a 3-minute or a 2-minute speech in every Toastmaster club and force yourself to make it brief, make it brief, make it brief. If you just constantly see what you can get rid of as you go, then your speech is going to become more powerful. And that's part of the reason, those of you that ask about, well, how do you know when you're done? I would suggest we're never done, because it can become a game that you write it all out and start looking and saying, okay, could I strike that example? Does the meaning lose some of its luxuriousness if I take that out? Sometimes it does, and so it has to stay, but the exercise of that makes the speech tighter. That's what is great about Toastmasters. So before we go into Q&A, I'll give you an example of a story that I had to edit. If I were doing a contest, again, I would use this as my my story to do the next contest, but they don't let me do that anymore. And now I'm trying to think, you asked me if you could have an example of before and after, and I just don't think I could probably stumble through that. I'm not sure you would take anything from it. So I will give you the final result, the edited version, and I'll talk then about, in an effort to scratch that itch, I'll talk about what that story originally looked like and what I changed, how I edited it once I wrote it all out. My dad was the best listener that I had ever met in my life. He was this kind of dad that would come and sit by my bedside at night. He would say, "Tell me about your day." I would drone on and on because I'm the big mouth, right? I would go on and on about that. Have you ever just wanted someone to listen to you, just to hear what you had to say, to really see you? And that's what my dad did for me. I would drone on, and he would sit there most of the time and just look at me like this. And I thought everyone grew up that way. But I recognized as I got into high school and college that didn't happen. It was during college, one of the summers. My dad was an elementary school principal, so he had the summers off, and we would drive through the mountains of Colorado. And on this particular day, it was approaching the noon hour, and we were really hungry. We didn't know where to go until we topped the hill and we started coming down into this little town. Now, town is benevolent to what this was. There was a post office and a restaurant, but the restaurant is all we needed, and it was a glorious restaurant. It was a log cabin all the way around, had this massive wraparound decking with glass windows of the inside portion so you could look out over the mountains all around you with the pine trees growing up taller than any skyscraper around. We pulled into the gravel parking lot, got out, and we heard the gravel crunch underneath our feet right as we breathed in that cold mountain air, and the scent of pine needles filled us up. It was amazing, but not quite as amazing as when we walked into the restaurant. They had obviously finished fresh baked cinnamon rolls. We immediately had our mouths watering. We were guided over to the table by a window. We sat down, and my dad, as he did, started asking questions. And I immediately jumped in. I was talking, I was telling about my day. I was going on and on. My sister looked across and just interrupted me, and she said, "Mike, why do you keep talking so much? You're just a big mouth." And I said, "Oh, am I a big mouth?" And I opened my mouth. And she said, "Oh my goodness, your mouth is huge." My dad said, "Do you know that the average person can put 3 fingers in their mouth?" I put 3 fingers in my mouth. There's a lot of room there. I can get 4 fingers, maybe even 5. And so I thought, how big is my mouth? So I looked over at the window, looking out to the pine trees and the mountains. And I looked in my reflection in that window, and I opened my mouth. I said, "Oh my, that's huge." And my mom said, "Well, where did you get that mouth? Did you get it from me?" She opens her mouth. She has this little bitty mouth. And my dad said, "Well, did you get that from me?" He opens his mouth, and my sister, rolled her eyes. "I can't believe we're doing this." But she said, "Well, do I have a big mouth too?" So she opened her mouth, and we were all looking at our reflection in the window, raising our mouths. And my sister was the first one to look through the window at the family sitting on the other side, looking aghast at us in the restaurant. Now think of it from this other family's perspective. They go to Colorado, they're driving through the mountains, they decide to pull over to have a beautiful lunch, and they go and they're seated on the deck. They begin to eat their lunch right as their young daughter begins to cry because the family just inside the restaurant, one by one, turn to her and go, well, that's when the food came. We got up, my dad put some money on the table, we got back, got in the van, and we took off. And the reason I tell you that story is it wraps back around to that point. We never want to leave our audience behind. Every time we get up to speak, really every time we have a human interaction, there is a pane of glass between us. We can't see it, but it's there. And we have a choice in that moment as speakers or as interactors with another beautiful human. We can treat that pane of glass as a mirror, or we can treat it as a window. I would suggest that we treat it as a window, that we see the other person across from us. We make them the most important person in the world to us at that time. And if that's an audience of 5 or 50 or 5,000, those are the most important humans. We don't use it as a window to see our own reflection as speakers. We see it as a window. Because if my family had seen that pane of glass as a window rather than a mirror on that day, that poor family sitting on the other side would not still be in therapy today. So I'll stop there. Let's go into Q&A. That's an example of a speech where that was edited afterward. What I added in the editing process was I had nothing about smell. And I was reading data about how few presentations talk about what we see, what we hear, what we feel, maybe are the emotions, but so much of our brain is directly tied to what we smell. As I put in that, I made it tighter. I gave too many extraneous details in the first one, but I added in the picture of all the setting around and the crunch of the gravel, trying to fill out the scene, and added in, hopefully, the humor at the end about the family still not being in therapy. I don't know if they're in therapy. I hope they're not. But all right, I'm going to stop share and let's go to some Q&A. And if you don't mind doing the little raising of the hand virtually, that way, because those line up at the top that I can see. And while you're doing that, I'll look back at some of the questions in the chat. What's the winning structure of a winning speech? That came from Frank. I'll address that. Well, one of the structures I shared with you is that story brand structure. You could take that story brand structure and you could just build that out to be a winning speech. A lot of the data shows that our brains are primed for that kind of structure. A hero has a problem, finds a guide who brings them a plan and calls them to action. That's a big deal. And then shows them, if you follow this, things could go well. If you don't, things could go poorly. There are different iterations of that. I told you about my own iteration where I make the guide someone else, my dad or Mrs. Montgomery or my friend Maria. I did another contest speech where I made it my daughter. So that's a winning structure speech. A lot of, in Toastmasters, winning contest structures are the points are made in a story. And that's also a lot of the structure that I used in the speeches that I won with. I came out telling a story and then made signpost points along the way, where essentially that structure is a story with a moral. So I hope that helps. If that didn't scratch that itch, then feel free to jump back into the Q&A. Let's go to, I think, Philip, I saw your hand up first, but now it's back down. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. A lot of these speeches really are about a personal experience. You've done speeches about your own past personal experiences. How do you make that? How do you put the you of the audience into that kind of speech? Because it's about you, not about them.
Right, right. Let's try to workshop this for just a minute. Can you give me a very brief example, either maybe a brief example of a story about you that you hope the audience learns something from?
Okay, here's a story.
Now, I do have to. Sorry, I have to get my disclaimer. Since we're Toastmasters, if this goes longer than 2 minutes, I'm gonna have to stop us. So, feel free to, but go right ahead.
Well, it won't even take 2 minutes.
Pardon?
It won't even take 2 minutes. Okay.
Oh, all right, all right.
Here's a little story about a time when I did some running. I did a spot of running where I did something fantastic without any training. As a consequence of that was that I was dreadful on the occasion of sports day, which followed 2 days later. And it was all about that experience of how I entered the event without even doing the right kind of preparation, and had the bad consequence of that. But what did I learn from that, and how did I appear, and how I was commended for not giving up, and so on. So it's really about my personal experience. How do I put that into the audience?
So I hear two morals there that one of two you could use. One is that I want to tell the audience that the single message I want to give the audience is that you must train. Practice is the key, not talent, but practice is the key. Or that or perseverance. Persevering is the key. So which message you want me to go with?
Not giving up.
Not giving up. So I'd say perseverance, not giving up is the, okay. So the way, if it were me, and I'm just doing this on the fly, and I take that, here's an example. You were so close, weren't you? You were just that far away from ultimate success. The trouble is you didn't know it was just one more step, did you? Have you ever been at a place where you wanted something so badly to succeed, but you just couldn't stick with it? Years ago, I was running a race and I had this success that I was going with. The success turned out to help me win, and ultimately I achieved this. The reason I'm telling you that is to say it's not too late for you. You can pick that back up again. I've been where you have been. You can pick that back up again, and if you will just not give up, you will succeed where you did not before. Okay, little structured. So does that make sense? By somehow asking a question, by focusing on you at the audience at the beginning, you make it about them. And then the problem is that they gave up. You have to tell your story because it shows where you're a credible guide, right? But the purpose of telling your story is to show that you've been there before, and so that you have credibility showing them, here, I've walked that path before, and I can show you how to walk that path also. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the question. That's good. All right, Jenny, I think I saw your hand up next.
Thanks. Given we're taught to connect with our audience, which may include pathos, logos, or ethos, and your audience may be neurodiverse, where there's variations in the way they learn, think, and behave, how do you make your speech more inclusive so that you can have more of an impact?
Yeah, that may be beyond the scope of my expertise today. There being so I was thinking when you said logos, pathos, and I'm thinking kinesthetic, auditory, and verbal, but though that's not what you're asking, is it?
So pathos is like emotions. Some people connect on logic, which is and credibility, ethos, and logos. But the thing is, your audience is mixed, right? And
Right.
granted, your talk was about minimalistic, lowest common denominator. Journalists say, speak like a fifth grader so that everyone can understand, perhaps. Again, these are different best practices, but if your audience also happens to be neurodivergent, where they absorb information at different rates or faster rates, how do you include them also in the journey so that they can connect with you in your speech and experience?
That's a great question. And I'm going to, so let's start going down a number of ways to look at that. And I may have to come back to you to ask again what I've left out. Let's talk first about the fifth grader. If I projected that I think everybody should make their speech at the level of a fifth grader, then I miscommunicated. To me, minimalism is about saying less, not saying it less luxuriously. That's why I put it in that idea of luxurious minimalism, is that I think that I'm a fan of vocabulary, and I've heard a lot of evaluations talking to someone saying, no, you need to dumb down your speech. And I came in afterward and said, I disagree, that I think that if you speak with a high vocabulary, then using that is just fine. Also knowing that you're going to lose part of your audience. But I think that's the second point, that we have to get comfortable that not everyone will resonate with what we say. That Seth Godin, I think, says this better and more consistently than anyone else that I run into when he talks about content messaging. So everybody wants to come out and say, my message is for everyone. Well, I'll tell you a more personal example. My wife, Julie, and her business partner, they teach, her business partner is a literary agent, and they'll bring in authors who say, my message is for everyone. And they'll say, then you need to know your message will not resonate with anyone. No one will see it. It's just too diverse. This world is more specialized than it ever has been. And we need to get comfortable with the idea that we speak to a niche. It may be a niche that looks like us, it may be a niche that sounds like us, it may be a niche that has our range of IQ, but we need to not blow off everyone else, but we need to recognize that we will get feedback saying this part of your speech was no good. And we can say, this is the Seth Godin part, we can say, hey, that's okay, it's not for you, but someone else is for you. So I'm a fan of broadening to make it as palatable for everyone who wants to get something from it. Neurotypical, I've got two daughters that have special needs, and so I'm very attuned to a world that is set toward the majority and does not work very well for individuals. And I believe that we as humans can broaden that to be more inclusive all the way around the world. But in terms of content, we will not, our message will really not resonate with everyone. And our message may resonate with only a minority, strongly resonate with only a minority of individuals, but that's who we're for. That's who we were placed on this earth to speak to. And that's why it's so great to have a diversity of speakers, because then someone else is able to speak to the groups that we don't resonate with. Now, that being said, those who who approach a speech or resonate with emotion, thought, thought, and then also credibility, I would say we can make an effort to use our style in our editing by broadening out what we do say and in our own style to include stories that bring emotion. And I would encourage us to fit humor into that too, because humor then does elicit emotion between people and we build rapport whenever we laugh together. So putting in a story, that's why when I talk about like my keynote about listening, I try really hard to do that, is set myself up about, tell why I'm a good guide about listening, how I have built some things based on the really hearing teams and hearing the divergent opinions on a factory floor. And then I give a lot of data, hopefully speaking to, that's the logos, right? Give a lot of data about, and I tick it off, but then the tools that I give, I talk about my conversation with my dad in his final days and what he taught me about listening. So hopefully the audience, they are able to grab one of those three areas, and I'm still being true to myself doing that way. Also, that's also why I try to put in the different senses, because if we've got visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners. And so when you're walking, when, maybe their ears perk up when I'm talking about walking on gravel, or I might show a picture. You may remember nothing I said and just remember a picture of that bridge and remember the concept. Okay, I've got to stay on the bridge of trust. My hope is that what you remember is the baby up against the glass. And that's the big takeaway from today is I've got to not make it about me, but the visual learners and auditory, obviously we hear there. So man, that was, I feel like I did that question a disservice and I apologize, but I hope that kind of addresses some of that, and a really good question that helped me stretch my brain a little bit. And if you want to talk more about it, feel free to email me because I find that fascinating. Thank you very much. I see a red. I think we're closing toward the end. Are there any other burning? So you tell me. I show that we're going to wrap at, let me see, it would be 1:30 my time in about 10 minutes. Is that correct? Or do we need to wrap sooner than that?
Actually, we're supposed to wrap at 11:15 our time, which is 1:15.
Oh, your time? Oh, my time, 1:15?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, I misunderstood.
Okay.
Well, then I will close quickly. If you want to continue the conversation, this is where you can find me. I do not charge ever for Toastmasters. I do all my pro bono work for Toastmasters, and but I do keynote and do team dynamics and training for primarily banks and teams. If I can help them talk about editing presentations, please introduce me. And that's the only, I have nothing to sell. Finally, you can make just by editing using, I would suggest these 5 different steps and the other things we talked about, you can make your presentations better just through the editing, taking creativity into that editing process. And doing that, I believe you can take a speech that may look like this and make it this. Thank you, my friends. It is wonderful to see you. Sorry, I ran you 4 minutes over. You all are beautiful humans, and I'm excited to shake your hand or wave to you or hug you in the near future.
Thank you so much, Mike. There's one key takeaway, and I guess I'm a visual person from what I remember. I remember luxuriously minimalistic. That particular image is still fresh in my mind, and I'm sure I'm going to carry it for all my speeches from now on. Less is more. I guess that's what my mantra is going to be from today. I have to really thank Mike because for others in the audience, Aaron Beverly could not make it at the last minute, as we said yesterday. And Mike was kind enough to step up and immediately said, okay, I will give the same workshop, whatever title Aaron had, and he modified, he created everything within the past 2-3 days. And thanks a lot, Mike, for helping us out at the last minute and coming here today and giving us this wonderful presentation with 5 key takeaways. And I'm sure we all will take those nuggets home, and we will use it in our next speeches. Once again, thanks a lot. And everyone, please feel free to contact Mike with the contact number that he said. And we hope to see more and listen to you more in the upcoming years in District 101. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
With that, we will go for a break now. We will assemble back at 11:30 for our international speech contest.